Hello and welcome to Geehaw Stadium here at Arrowhead Field, GHEA, but it's more fun that way. Matt Smith here as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Tough pill to swallow here. Colorado loses to Kansas 37-21. They fall to 8-3 on the season, 6-2 in conference, and back into the muck with a few other Big 12 teams now, and it certainly puts their chances at securing a spot in the Big 12 title game in jeopardy, really. This is a game where Colorado, both sides of the football, really struggled early. The offense eventually got it going, but that wasn't the biggest story. The defense today gave up 331 yards on the ground. This was the Colorado defense that we saw maybe a little bit earlier, but even against Nebraska, they were able to ratchet things back in the second half. This is more of what we saw from this team last year, just an inability to really affect the game enough to make a positive impact. And in many ways, they left their offense hanging out to dry when their offense didn't really have a great start themselves. Colorado, like I mentioned, gives up 330 yards on the ground, but 520 in total on 78 plays. Kansas possessed the ball for over 40 minutes, Colorado for under 20 minutes. They could not get the Jayhawks off the field in third down. They didn't punt the entire day. In fact, I believe the only time they didn't score was the last drive of the game that they kneeled it out. It was a really bad performance from this Colorado defense that I thought was starting to turn the page a little bit because they were able to hold Kansas to some field goals in the first half. And there was a second there coming out of halftime. You go right down, Travis scores, and you're thinking, oh man, maybe they got a shot. But the ensuing possession, Kansas immediately down the field and scored. And maybe should have been worse, honestly, if Colorado's defense didn't hold them to those few early field goals in the first half. It just a disheartening performance because everything was right there in front of them. And now, I don't know. And now I don't know. It doesn't feel very good, though. I'll tell you that much. It doesn't feel like things could break Colorado's way now. I guess there's always still a chance. They're going to need a lot of help from around the conference for sure, and it's not over till it's over. But this one's going to sting, and I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Robert Livingston and this defensive staff had done a really good job adjusting in second halves this year, tightening down other teams, and typically they have excelled at taking away what Kansas does really well. And what they do really well is run the football, and they couldn't take that away. Very reminiscent in many ways of the Kansas State game, just couldn't wrap up. Tackling was a real problem tonight, and that has not been a problem since much earlier in the season. Not indicative of this defense, but tonight it was. They just could not wrap up, whether it was Neal, whether it was Morrison, even Daniels on a couple of scrambles. They struggled to make plays in the running game defensively. And, they held Daniels 14-21, a $189 through the air, a touchdown as well. But they just didn't get enough pressure on the quarterback either, only sacked him one time, didn't affect the pocket enough to make him uncomfortable. And of course, Daniels has the ability to scramble and pick up something with his feet if you give him that opportunity. And a couple of times, third downs, just some inopportune moments, Colorado allowed Daniels to kind of get loose and pick up what he needed to for first down yardage and just continue moving the football and extending drives. And that's kind of one thing that we've seen a lot of teams this year try and do against the Buffs. Keep the ball on the ground, keep Shedeur and Travis on the sideline offensively, and just chip away, right? Chunk away. And Colorado's defense had risen to the occasion for the most part the latter half of the season up until tonight. They did not meet the moment, and I didn't have this game right at all. I thought I was very confident in this Buffs team heading into this one, and for all the reasons I was, they just didn't show up tonight. I trusted their defense would do a really good job against the run game. They held Utah last week to 30 yards total, and for the most part through, like 3 quarters, like 11 yards. So that was obviously just a glaring breakdown across the board. It never got fixed, and I think at a certain point we were kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop with Robert Livingston's defense, and where were those second half adjustments? They just weren't able to execute tonight, and they lost the physicality game, I thought, at the point of attack. Kind of on both sides of the football, really. Offensively, again, another slow start, and that's crushed them. Even if the defense was, as porous as they were tonight at times, if they started faster offensively, then I think they would have been okay. Coach Prime talked about how he doesn't mind 21 points in 19 minutes. I mean, I get where he's coming from, and, I don't think the offense was the reason why they lost this football game, but just not enough from that unit. And it felt more than anything, and it was glaring to me, at least in the second half. Kansas outcoached them to a degree. Now you've got to execute, you've got to wrap up, but again, there just wasn't any counter. They couldn't figure it out, they couldn't solve it, and I think it's kind of rare for this season to have that occur because they've been doing a really good job kind of solving these puzzles mid-game, just not tonight. You got to credit Lance Leipold and that coaching staff. And I felt like offensively their game plan was just leagues better than what Colorado brought to the table. They were very methodical tonight, and obviously with Neal, breaking as many tackles as he did, he finished with 37 carries for 207 yards. It was impressive from Neal, 5.6 per, 3 touchdowns on the ground, and through the air he had another touchdown with 80 yards in total. He goes over 300 on the day. Can't get gashed like that. You can't get gashed like that. But I thought it was the creativity. It was, timing of certain calls in the second half, that misdirection here, kind of RPO game, and Buffs could not respond. They just could not respond, and unfortunately, it wasn't close, really. I think it was one of those where Kansas pulls out a heartbreaker. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe a loss this time of year is hard to deal with no matter what, when all the stakes were on the table as they were. And when you're the ones, as Coach Prime brought up in the postgame, that fumble away the chance to control your own destiny, it hurts even more. There is a chance that Colorado could still make a Big 12 championship game, but they're going to need some help. I don't know what it means for everything else as far as bowl game. Is it the Alamo Bowl if they don't make it there? Will Shedeur and Travis play? Those will be questions, obviously, that we have undoubtedly, and not just those two guys, but a lot of other guys on this team. Running the football, they couldn't get their ground game going. That was one thing I felt like the offense really struggled with. They haven't, make it 3 weeks now, been able to run the football whatsoever. Didn't help at all that the one back they have that's been productive this year in Isaiah Augustive got hurt almost instantly into this game. Dallin Hayden just not getting the job done. What he finished with, 4 carries, 7 yards, net of a 5, and Welch did return, but didn't see much action. It was Kansas who did a really good job just killing a lot of that first quarter and first half clock. And so by the time you got the ball back, it just felt like you couldn't really run. But it wasn't an emphasis after Isaiah got hurt, and that's understandable. They haven't really had anybody other than him be able to get the job done this year. Third downs, again, they're 3 of 7 tonight. It's better. Certainly better than they had been the last few games, but I think in total was that 8 of 31 over the last 3 games. That's not good enough, not nearly. They got to be better there. And when you're struggling to convert third downs, again, I didn't think the third down thing was as big of a problem, but when you look at it in a broader context, it certainly speaks to maybe some of the issues, in my opinion, that they're having offensively. Now, clearly it's the defense that couldn't get off the field, couldn't wrap up, you didn't adjust, but at the same time, if you don't start as slow, you don't put yourself in as big of a hole, and then maybe, in the second half, you do end up having a chance to fight into this game. It just felt like that third quarter, the writing was on the wall that it wasn't going to be Colorado's night. And again, you got to credit Lance Leipold and Jalen Daniels and this Kansas team who treated this as their Super Bowl and played as if it was their Super Bowl. Great game plan, everybody on the same page, dialed in and executing. And, Colorado just could not, especially defensively tonight. Coach Prime mentioned how he felt like a lot of this was them reading their own headlines, and he tried to guard against that this week in practice, and he said he felt like he saw it coming. But with some of these players, they've never been in this position, so it's kind of hard to it's hard to coach it when words don't teach, I think is what I would say to that. Experience is life's greatest teacher, and now it's going to be pretty easy, on Sunday or Monday to go into the team meeting room and say, see, I told you, right? Well, experience just kicked your ass, so the words will help you teach then, because the experience is really the one doing the teaching. Shedeur, 23 of 29, 266, 3 touchdowns, only sacked 1 time. I didn't think pressure was a huge problem for him. He was scrambling a lot tonight and definitely trying to make a play when the play broke down. He did enough. I felt like they just didn't have the football enough. And so, maybe early they struggled and their script wasn't as dialed in as it could have been. I felt like there was just a lot behind the line of scrimmage. Instead of those inside slants, you saw Kansas kind of go to some of those looks, just quick ones out over the middle. And Colorado doesn't do a ton of that, and I think they could actually have some success with it. The one real positive note for the Buffs tonight, Travis Hunter maintains his Heisman campaign. 9 targets, 8 catches, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, 82 yards after catch. I mean, he was the real lone bright spot outside of Draylon Miller, who had a nice touchdown again as well. It was Travis. He had a really nice game, and defensively, I'm not sure that he allowed anything tonight. There were a couple picks that maybe he could have had, but the ball was, just a little short getting to him, so you don't really fault him on that one. It just, at a certain point, you need other guys to make plays, and they have all year up until this point. So a very somber, very disappointing evening, and while mathematically they may still have a chance, they're going to need some help here. Arizona State beat BYU, and they are at Arizona next weekend. BYU obviously losing to Arizona State, so Arizona State has 2 losses, BYU has 2 losses. As of the recording of this video, Iowa State has 2 losses. They play at Utah tonight. I think Utah winning would help them, because you would knock out Iowa State essentially. But this thing's not over, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good. I think we all kind of understood that to really have a real shot at it, you needed to control your own destiny based upon the fact that you dropped the one to Kansas State. And now that game kind of comes around and bites you again, because had you just not blown that coverage there at the end, you're not in this position and you could have, absorbed one of these, but you did. And now here you are. So now is where you wrestle with it. Now I think I want to make sure that I acknowledge it's obviously a somber tone and it's disappointing, right? Because I think Colorado is a better football team. They did not play better. They got their asses kicked in a large part tonight. However, credit to Kansas. We expect them at the top of the conference preseason. The other thing we have to say is it feels cheap right now because of everything that was in front of them and how confident I felt in them going into this game. 8-3, 6-2 in conference, just an unbelievable turnaround from not only last year but the beginning of this year. And it's not going to count for much, but clearly the program's headed in the right direction. And they still do have a shot here. It's just not a great one. And now you're probably going to need some results, maybe a few upsets. So I'm not exactly sure how it's all going to stack out, but it does feel like at a certain point the Kansas State game eventually was going to hurt you, and it's still there. It's still there. Can't get rid of it because now here you are and you blew a big opportunity tonight. A Colorado team that had played really well on the road. The last times we've been on a road here, Orlando, Tucson, Lubbock, they showed really well. And this wasn't a very good crowd. I mean, it's an NFL stadium. They had their moments, but it wasn't like it was a hostile environment. It was a Colorado team that didn't meet the moment. And I think that's the most disappointing because you're going to have to look in the mirror and reconcile with that. That being said, they made it so far this year. So I want to evaluate it in the context of winning your conference and winning the college football playoff, and also in the context of where they've come, because where they've come is impressive, but in the context of the college football playoff, you may end up falling short, or at least the Big 12 championship. You may end up falling short. Travis, though, the Heisman, that thing's wrapped up to me. I heard Joel Klatt made a mention last week, like if Colorado keeps winning, then Travis is the Heisman. They got to 8. No one thought they would get to 8, and Travis was a huge part of it. I don't really think the wins matter now. They might. We'll see what the voters feel like, but to me, again, tonight was like the icing on the cake of his Heisman campaign. 125 yards. I think that's 1,000 for the season. 2 touchdowns. What is that? 11 receiving touchdowns, 13 total touchdowns this year, and then whatever he's done, snaps wise, which was over 1,200, I believe, or right around there entering this game. And then, of course, with this one, I'm sure he's up into the 1,300, pushing towards 1,400. Other news and notes, not a ton really. This is a game where they blew it in a lot of ways, and they got throttled, I thought. Out physical, they got manhandled at times, they got out coached at times, and sure, there was a failure in execution to wrap up, but I felt like there just wasn't many great counters from CU's sideline. And and they lose this one to Kansas. And Kansas turns out to do something pretty incredible in being the first unranked team to beat 3 ranked teams in consecutive weeks. So there's that. They turn out to be the Big 12's Grim Reaper, I think you could even call them, because they essentially went and killed Iowa State's season. They basically, I don't know if they killed BYU's season, but BYU, they at least put them on the brink. And then tonight they may have done that again to Colorado. So look, it's disappointing. It's tough to swallow, and the Buffs have a lot to figure out here moving forward. Because no matter what, you got to finish on a high note. And Coach Prime said that he's glad it's a short week before Oklahoma State next week. That is Black Friday, another 10 a.m. game. And depending upon what happens, it may be the last time we see Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders play for Colorado, depending upon if they don't make the Big 12 championship game and don't make the playoff. Are they going to compete in the Alamo Bowl along with not just them? Because I think, look, I'm not sure how this is going to happen. I haven't spoken to anybody about this, and I don't even think they've really talked about it yet. But it's not just them, because if they dip out, I got to think that you got a lot of other guys that'll probably sit that out too on this team, because there's a lot of experienced seniors that are going to be looking towards the NFL. And, I think it would be a shame if we get there. Hopefully Colorado stays alive in this thing and they get the results they need. Hopefully a little bit later tonight, Utah can take care of Iowa State at home. Doesn't feel very likely to me, but we'll see how it all plays out. Not much else to say at the moment other than a really big missed opportunity. And it's been a hell of a season so far, there's no doubt about it, but we all knew that this could happen if they weren't careful. And tonight, Kansas wanted it way more than they did. And that one is tough to reconcile because everything was right there for Colorado. And Kansas is really just fighting for, keeping their season rolling a few more weeks with bowl eligibility. So tough one, 37-21, by and large an ass kicking here by the Jayhawks. And this stadium's just been a house of horrors lately for Colorado teams. Can't wait to get out of here, but appreciate you tuning in as always. Again, before you get out of here, like and subscribe. Helps me out a ton. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for following along all season, and we'll talk to you when we get back to Boulder here coming up next week.